If you've ever worked for a micromanager, this story won't just make sense, it'll hit your body. The shoulders that you need to drop, the clenched jaw, the spike of anxiety when you hit send on anything because somehow it's always wrong. I had a boss like that, and she would ask us to BCC her on all client emails. And it sounds like maybe a workflow. It was surveillance. The constant corrections, the constant control, nothing was ever right. And after a while, I stopped thinking, what am I missing? And I just started thinking, oh, this isn't about doing it right. This is about just her. Here's the twist. That environment, it nearly broke me. But what it actually did do positively was it ended up sharpening the skills that paid off later in my career. Not because she taught me those skills, but because I had to survive her. In this video, I'm going to show you how micromanagement teaches you things no one else does, and how I turned that into a career advantage that has earned me more money and visibility since. So if you've ever walked away from a job wondering if it was you, this might help things click. So can we get into the manager? Every email I sent, every deck I built, there was a challenge, a correction, why would you do it this way? You should do it this way. You should do it that way. And I remember talking to one of my coworkers. We had the same title. We reported up to the same boss, and my boss had told her to fix some things. So she did. And once she fixed it, she sent it back to my boss. And she was just like, well, no, you need this, this, this. The things that she said she needed were the things she just told her to delete. So my coworker and I had a long chat about it. Is this a pattern? Do you see this too? Is it just me? And when this was happening, I did what most people do at first. I tried harder. I adjusted. I second guessed myself before she even had a chance to. And I started pre-editing my own thoughts. I started shrinking my ideas before they left my mouth. That's what constant criticism does. It moves inside you. And 3 people left the team in the 8 months after she took over. 1 transferred, 2 quit without a backup plan, and every single exit interview probably said something diplomatic like pursuing other opportunities. But we all knew. We talked about it on our coffee chats. It wasn't a great time. So what I finally realized and started internalizing was I wasn't the problem. But even though I realized that, I just wasn't sure. So I took a vacation, and when I took the vacation, while I was gone, she handled my clients. My role at the time was onboarding, launch management, very structured work, same emails, different client names, stuff like that. So you can make a template out of it with minor customizations. When I came back, I reviewed the emails that she sent, and I did what I think any logical person would do. I copied them and I changed the names, changed the products, sent them out. She replied almost immediately, talking about, why would you ever send something like this? And at that moment, the issue was not quality. The issue was that I sent it, that I was doing it. And once you see things like that clearly, something shifts. You stop internalizing the feedback. You stop trying to win approval that was never on the table. You stop playing the emotional game. You start playing a different one. And what I realized that instead of spiraling, I started treating the situation like a system. This was early before AI tools were becoming more available. I used ChatGPT. I created what I would call a manager decoder. I pulled some of the emails that she had, and I would put that in the thread. Then I would also give any feedback she'd given me, any corrections she sent me, feedback on decks, replies where she rewrote whatever I said, and I pasted that into the AI, and I asked, can you analyze the communication style here? What patterns do you notice? What does this person prioritize? What triggers a negative response? What is this person's thought process? And what came back was really helpful. AI is really good at finding patterns. And what the AI identified was that she favored short, punchy sentences, that she almost never used qualifiers like I think or maybe, that she interpreted any hedging language as incompetent. It also caught something I hadn't consciously noticed. She hated when I offered context before the ask. She wanted the request first, explanation second. And every time I set up with the why before the what, she would rewrite it. As I started flipping my structure, I would ask first, context second, short answers, no hedging. And before I sent her anything, I ran it through the AI lens. Did it match her structure? Did I anticipate the usual objections? Did it remove the things that she always fixated on? Did the feedback disappear? No. It did change slightly, but it did not disappear. But here's what changed. I knew for a fact that it wasn't me. That kind of clarity stabilizes you. It gives you back your footing. I stopped flinching every time I had to hit send. Here is the part I didn't see coming. Because of this situation, I got really good at using AI. I use it in a practical, real work under pressure way. So I learned how to analyze communication styles and adapt to them. I learned how to translate unclear expectations into usable direction. I learned how to adjust tone without losing intent. Use AI as a thinking partner instead of a shortcut. And those skills ended up paying me later. Actual bonuses, promotions. I work mainly in client-facing work, so that's training, consulting, enablement. I already had a system for quickly understanding how someone communicates and mirroring their structure back to them, because a lot of my job is creating proposals, is talking to different clients, and it's easier for someone to hear you if you're already on the same wavelength as them. So I knew this. Using AI and kind of honing the system because of my manager worked wonders for me, because executives, skeptical stakeholders, teams resistant to change, I could read the room faster because I'd been trained under pressure to decode what people actually wanted versus what they said they wanted in a corporate setting. There's no way you can actually learn this in a course. You can learn the theory, but I learned it trying to survive. So essentially, micromanagers also teach you things accidentally, skills you don't realize you're building until you're somewhere else and people start commenting on them. And at first, you feel defensive because you're like, SOS, are they about to critique this? But then you realize, no, this is actually good. And one of them is navigating ambiguity. When nothing is clearly defined, when the rules change based on people's moods, you stop waiting for perfect instructions because you know you're still responsible for an output. So you learn how to move with incomplete information. You infer, you decide, you keep going. I remember a project where my micromanager boss gave me one line. It was kind of like, fix the onboarding deck or something very super vague, and didn't really give tangible things for me to work with. So I had to kind of like look through other decks and see what were other people in the company shipping out, and then reframe my deck based on that. You're not asking a ton of clarifying questions. When I did that for that particular project, she still had edits, but the conversation was different. I wasn't asking permission anymore. I was presenting a position. This is called executive presence. At that time, it just felt like holding it together. Another thing is problem solving. What I learned was to stop bringing problems, but to bring options. I would usually come into the situation with, here's the problem, here's what I think. What do you think? And what I ended up shifting towards was, here's the problem, here are 3 options, here are the trade-offs, here's my recommendation. I know one of the biggest compliments I get today and a lot of the clients I work with is, you figure things out, you learn quickly. You're one of the few people who actually makes my job easier. And if I'm being honest, I have to thank my old boss for this, because through her actions, it crystallized what works for me. Or maybe not for me, but what works for the industry. And also, what working with her taught me was to learn to take feedback. I've always been really good at feedback, but what I started doing was I started vetting it more and seeing, what do I take, what do I leave, dependent on the context and where I was and what I needed to get done. Because feedback, intentional feedback, becomes a bit of foresight. You are able to anticipate things a little bit better because you start understanding what people are looking for and you're not surprised. You start predicting edits before they happen. You see the objections coming, where logic ends and maybe ego begins. You just start seeing things more carefully. And there is a fine line between that and hypervigilance. And finally, I learned about overcommunication. I had to learn how to narrate my work. What am I doing? Why was I doing it? What is coming up next? Where am I stuck in things? And it can feel excessive and maybe even performative, but here's what I learned and I realized later, especially in remote work, this is actually elite behavior, especially when you're working with a ton of teams. The people who get promoted in distributed teams are the ones who make their work visible without being asked. They build trust through transparency. They reduce chaos. They protect their own time by preventing the just checking in messages. And I didn't learn that from LinkedIn posts. I learned it because my manager couldn't stand not knowing what I was doing at every single moment. With that said, at this point, you might be wondering, so why didn't you just leave? And here's the thing, I didn't leave on my own terms. I was laid off about 6 months after the vacation email incident. And Here's the part I don't think people talk about enough. By the time that layoff came, I was a bit relieved, but I was also very depleted. My self-esteem was shot. Imposter syndrome was running the show. I didn't have the headspace to job search. I couldn't craft an impactful resume or show up to networking conversations with any kind of real presence because at that point, I just didn't feel great. When you spent months, years being told your work isn't good enough, even though your work is being highlighted in spaces privately you're told that it's not enough, that message moves into your bones. Even when you know logically it's not about you, even when you have proof, the knowing and the feeling don't always sync. So when I got laid off, I didn't pivot gracefully to my next opportunity. I sat with it. I had to. And honestly, the layoff was a blessing. I took a year off, and a good chunk of that first part of it was just letting my system heal. Before I even started thinking about what's next for me, I just sat, I baked, I slept, I worked out. That part didn't feel good. The layoff made the decision I didn't have the energy to make. It gave me space to recover, to remember what I was actually good at, not through her lens, but through my own, through my brag book that had receipts from old coworkers as well. So what I had to do was to rebuild my confidence, not only through just knowing more about myself, but also surrounding myself with people who actually wanted me to win and who were honest with me, but who weren't honest in a way that was deprecating and detrimental. I don't want this to come off as me romanticizing micromanagement because I wouldn't choose it. I wouldn't want it for anybody. However, there are always lessons in everything that you do. And through that experience, I had to learn a lot of things. I had to learn to see myself clearly again outside of someone else's distorted feedback loop. And I think that's harder than building a system. That's slower than optimizing your emails, and nobody gives you the framework for it. I left that job sharper, more observant, more strategic, less easily shaken. I didn't get better because of the control. I got better because I learned how to operate despite it, and I learned how to recover from it. So if this story felt uncomfortably familiar, that's usually not random. Maybe you're still in it, still flinching before you hit send, still shrinking your ideas before anyone has a chance to critique them. You're not speaking up in meetings, you're not raising your hand for new opportunities, or maybe you're on the other side of it. You're technically free, but still carrying the residue. You're still not sure what you're actually good at anymore because you spent so long being told that you weren't good enough. A lot of people I talk to aren't confused about working harder. Very few people need to work harder. However, people are confused about where their skills actually fit next, especially after years of adapting to other people's dysfunction. You've been so focused on surviving that you haven't mapped out what you're actually good at, what all that adaptation built into you. And that's what my clarity calls for, to help you figure out all the mess so you can move forward to more aligned opportunities. So these clarity calls aren't about a 5-step plan or rush you into anything. It's to say, hey, let's slow down so you can see yourself clearly again. To look at what you've actually done, what you're working with, not through their lens, but through your own, through the facts, not random stories that you've either told yourself or other people have put onto you. If that kind of conversation would be useful to you, there's a link in the description below. If not, take the reflection. Both are valid. You don't owe anyone a perfectly optimized career, but you do deserve to see your own value clearly, even if no one in that last room could, even if no one in the current room can. If this resonated, follow for more. I share about my experience from challenging spaces to healthier spaces.